Have you ever felt that on your spiritual journey, in your search for yourself, you have strayed from your own heart, from taming your thoughts so much you stopped feeling, from resisting your emotions so much you no longer recognize them? You conquered your inner voices, but something inside you fell silent along the way. And you are not alone. Science has observed this in brains undergoing intense mental training. In states of extreme discipline, the prefrontal cortex, the center of decision-making and focus, becomes dominant. But in this state, the amygdala, which stores our most human emotions, is silenced. Neuroscience calls this affective suppression. Spiritual traditions call it an energetic rupture with the heart. In hermeticism, there is an ancient warning. Those who wish to rule the mind must first embrace the soul. Because when you seek control without compassion, you don't free yourself. You distance yourself, and what should be ascension becomes isolation. Carl Jung said that the greatest risk of self-knowledge was the illusion of superiority over feeling. And many fall into this abyss in silence, believing they are awakening, when in fact they are only shielding themselves. But what if this mistake is not your fault? What if you have followed a path that was promised to you as evolution, but which, behind the scenes, was turning you into something you never wanted to be? Now we can. Let's open this invisible portal, as it has never been opened for you before. If you feel that this path has already begun to harden you, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments, "I feel so much, but I've hidden myself for so long." It all starts with the purest of intentions. You wanted to heal yourself. You wanted to control your destructive thoughts, master your impulses. You wanted to be in control of your own mind and no longer be held hostage by your emotions. And for a while, it worked. You grew stronger. You gained clarity. You stopped being destabilized by anything. Your mind became a temple of discipline. But little by little, something inside you stopped vibrating. You became resistant, and with that, less receptive. You stopped reacting to the world, and that seemed like maturity. But you also stopped being moved by it, and that was the first sign. In neuroscience, this phenomenon is described as hyperactivation of the cognitive control network, a state where the mind becomes so rational and vigilant that it represses everything that is spontaneous, effective, intuitive. On the spiritual path, this same state has been known for centuries by initiatory masters. They said, the mind is a blade, but the soul is the breath that directs it. Without a soul, control becomes imprisonment, focus becomes rigidity, and silence becomes absence. You didn't stop feeling because you are more evolved. You stopped feeling because you created such an intense force field that even your essence was prevented from passing through. And maybe you called it inner strength, but was it really? At first, you believed you were simply rising above, that this emotional detachment was a sign of a new level of consciousness. You saw yourself above common reactions, mundane crises, attachments. But then you realized something uncomfortable. You didn't just stop reacting to the world, you stopped moving inside. And what seemed like enlightenment began to feel like disconnection. It was no longer peace, it was indifference. It was no longer presence. It was a functional absence, like someone living on autopilot, only in a superior way. Science observes something similar in studies of adaptive dissociation, minds that learn to disconnect emotions as a survival mechanism, and then don't know how to reconnect. In esotericism, this condition was seen as an inverted resonance. Human beings, in seeking the high without rooting themselves in the ground, break their circuit with the essence. It's like trying to channel cosmic energy without being anchored to the earth. You start to rise too high, and ironically, you lose touch with what keeps you alive. This is where many get lost. They think they are becoming more and more conscious, but in reality, they are just moving away from the center. You start to notice it in the small details, in the encounters you have, but aren't really present, in the conversations you listen to, but don't resonate with, in situations that used to touch you, but now pass you by like the wind. It's as if something is filtering everything, as if you were seeing life from behind a glass. Nothing invades you, nothing destabilizes you, but also nothing touches you. The whole world seems more distant, even the good things. You hear a song that once moved you to tears, and now it just plays. Someone hugs you with love and you respond, but you don't feel the same wave inside. You laugh, but the laughter is more sound than emotion. At first, you even believe that this is a higher way of living, that you have finally left behind the excess emotion, the drama, the ups and downs. You think that you now inhabit a higher vibration, neutral, full, unperturbed. But little by little you realize that this neutrality tastes like absence, and this fullness is just emotional silence. Carl Jung would call this identification with the spiritual persona, a state in which you believe you are the higher self, when in fact you are only playing out the ideal you have created of yourself. We become what we pretend to be, and then we forget who we really are. Neuroscience, on the other hand, describes this mechanism as affective repression through prolonged adaptation. It is the brain learning to avoid suffering at the cost of blocking feelings. And the more you identify with this evolved you, the harder it is to back down, because the armor already feels like skin, because admitting that you are lost sounds like weakness, and because feeling again would mean giving up the control you have gained. In hermeticism, this point is called internal correspondence breakdown, when what is shown on the outside no longer communicates with what pulsates inside. The seeker wears the light, but inside is in shadow. But there is a sign, a small flash of truth. It appears when you ask yourself, why am I no longer moved by what used to make me cry? Or worse, why do I smile without feeling the smile inside? This is the moment when the soul knocks on the door, softly, as if it still believes it can be heard. And if you remain silent inside, there may still be time to open the door. This is the most dangerous part of the journey, not when you are lost, but when you believe you have found yourself. Because at this stage, the ego does not appear as pride or arrogance. It appears as neutrality, as lucidity, as control. But in reality, it is just fear in disguise. Fear of feeling again, fear of becoming disorganized, fear of letting your guard down and rediscovering vulnerability. And the ego is smart. It knows that if it presents itself as evolved, you will let it stay. So it dresses itself in the language of light. It talks about frequency, peace, and detachment, but inside, it is just freezing your soul. This is what some esoteric schools called spark inversion, when the inner flame doesn't go out, but is encapsulated in symbolic ice. It still pulses, it still shines, but it no longer warms anyone else. Carl Jung spoke of this when he said that the greatest illusion of self-knowledge is to believe that one is above the shadow. Because true awakening is not about getting rid of the human. It's about including the human in the divine. Science calls this the disintegration of the integrated emotional network, when the centers of empathy and emotional connection disconnect from the regions responsible for decision-making. You still function, you still speak beautifully, but you no longer feel as you did before. And here is the quietest point of fall. You don't know you're falling, because everything seems to be in order, even when shrouded in ice, even silenced by layers of control. The soul does not remain silent forever. At some point it starts to beat again. Sometimes it's in an unexplained crisis, an emptiness that arises in the middle of a normal day, a longing that appears without origin, or that uncomfortable feeling that even though you've achieved so much, something very essential is missing. It's the soul stirring, as if to say, I'm still here. Neuroscience describes this phenomenon as reactivation of the limbic vagal axis, a process where the nervous system tries to reconnect areas disconnected from emotion, even after long periods of emotional suppression. In hermeticism, this would be equivalent to the repercussion of the inner fire, the moment when the divine spark, even if buried, finds a way to vibrate, and it moves like a breath, light, fragile, almost imperceptible, but loaded with truth. You feel that something is trying to call you back. It's not the mind, it's not reason, it's something older, more intimate, like the memory of who you once were, before you wanted to protect yourself from the world. And in that instant, the journey changes direction. It doesn't want to knock you down, it doesn't want to destroy everything you've built with so much effort, but it wants to come in. It wants to reoccupy your body, your words, your emotions. It wants you to recognize it, not as weakness, but as your origin. You can resist. You can try to rationalize, meditate more, practice more ascension techniques. But there will come a time when no mantra will be enough, because what your soul wants is not control. It wants presence. Neuroscience proves that authentic emotional balance does not come from mastering your emotions, but from integrating them. It is the ability to allow feelings to exist without being carried away by them. It is what the ancients called returning to the dwelling place of the heart, a state in which the higher mind bows in reverence to the fire of the soul. Carl Jung said that you don't achieve enlightenment by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness within you conscious. And maybe that darkness isn't a threat. Maybe it's the womb where your soul wants to be reborn. That breath that started out timid now beats stronger, not like a scream, but like a slow drum beating in your chest. You feel something calling you inward, not to flee the world, but to rediscover your origin. And suddenly, the silence that once calmed you begins to disturb you. That feeling of being in control loses its luster, and an uncomfortable truth is revealed. You were not at peace. You were anesthetized. Many stop here. They try to meditate more, discipline themselves more, reinforce their practices, mantras, techniques, as if it were possible to tame the spirit with the same logic that tames the mind. But the soul does not obey commands. It only surrenders to those who listen to it. You begin to remember who you were before you wanted to be evolved, before you wanted to appear strong, before you learned to shield yourself. And you realize that your light never needed to protect itself from pain, because it was precisely through pain that it learned to shine. Carl Jung said that no tree can grow to the sky without its roots reaching hell. And perhaps your roots, until now, were stuck in the concrete of denial. But now, something is stirring. You find yourself opening up, breathing deeper, crying perhaps, not out of sadness, but out of permission. Neuroscience calls this sensory affective reintegration. It is when the nervous system, after years of operating under threat, begins to understand that it can feel again without being invaded. Your body ceases to be a trench and becomes a home again. This is the most dangerous and most sacred point of the journey, the return to feeling. Hermeticism said that he who knows the movement of the soul governs the forces of the world. But the movement of the soul is made of flow, of wind, of fire, of water, not of armor. In ancient Egyptian symbolism, the heart was weighed on Ma'at scales, and for the soul to be freed, it had to be lighter than a feather. But how can you have a light heart when it has been buried under years of control? It's time to dig, not with the shovel of the mind, but with the warmth of presence. Do you remember the last time you felt something with pure intensity, a real chill in your chest, that involuntary tear that asked for no explanation? It wasn't weakness, it was a portal, because feeling is what anchors the soul to the body, and without that, there is no transcendence, only escape. True enlightenment does not reject the shadow, it includes it. And you did not come to Earth to be untouchable. You came to touch and be touched. And this whole journey that seemed to distance you from humanity now reveals to you the sacred is precisely what pulses inside you. If you've come this far, it's because something in you resists, not to pain, but to the idea of living without a soul. You can keep functioning, maintaining appearances, habits, control. You can keep saying the right words, meditating at the right time, performing the steps of self-knowledge as if they were goals to be achieved. Or you can start over, without discarding what you have learned, but reintegrating what you abandoned to appear strong. The true initiate is not the one who conquers himself. It is the one who recognizes himself as whole, including the parts that still bleed. This is where true healing begins, not when you erase the past, but when you offer it space to transform into wisdom. Neuroscience would say that this moment is the full reactivation of the brain's default network, when cognition, emotion, and presence return to operating as a single organism. But ancient occultism would call this the descent of the soul into the temple. You are the temple. Your body is the altar. Your feelings are the sacred fire. Carl Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens." And perhaps now you are ready to awaken, not to flee the world, but to inhabit it with a living soul. Now that the veil has fallen, there is no turning back. You have seen, you felt it, and as much as your mind tries to drag you back to where you were, your heart no longer fits in the armor of the past. You realize that all your efforts to evolve, all your focus on being better had a noble purpose. But at some point you strayed from the path. You didn't need to become a statue of light. You needed to learn to feel without drowning, to open your heart without being swallowed up, to allow the human and the divine to coexist. Hermeticism already said, "As above, so below." And you, who sought so hard for the heights, perhaps you just forgot to come back down to earth. But now you're coming back, with your eyes open, with your soul alive, and with a new understanding. Spirituality that does not embrace feeling is just vanity dressed up as transcendence. Neuroscience shows that the deepest neural pathways are not formed by repression, but by emotional integration, by embracing the shadow, by listening to old pains, by having the courage to inhabit your own vulnerability. It is at this point that spirituality meets the flesh, and the initiate becomes whole. Do you remember what you were looking for? Perhaps it was peace, purpose, strength. But now you see that all of this has always been within you, asleep, perhaps, but never lost. Carl Jung left us a map. The privilege of a lifetime is to realize who you really are, and who you really are is not just light, it is shadow too. It is flesh and spirit. It is flaw and eternity. True awakening is not about controlling everything. It is about allowing yourself to exist fully, to cry when you need to be moved without fear, to feel anger, yes, but to feel love too. And above all, to allow yourself to be affected, because it is in affection that the soul anchors itself. It is in emotion that the divine finds form, and it is in presence that the invisible manifests itself. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be true. And there is only one way to do that. Step down from the pedestal of your mind and return to inhabiting your body as a living temple. Now you know the greatest spiritual hack is not controlling your inner world. It is recognizing the soul that inhabits the silence between one thought and another. And from here, everything changes. Because when the soul breathes again, the world breathes with it. You don't need to rush or look for the next step right now. The journey that began in this video continues in silence, inside you. And it will reveal itself in the small choices you make, in the way you speak, in the way you feel, in the way you look at the world, and allow yourself to be seen. because now something has already shifted. And even if the mind tries to return to old habits, the soul already knows the way. May you walk lightly, open, whole, and may you never again need to hide your sensitivity to be respected. If you felt truth in this video, leave your mark in the comments with the words, "Silence reconnected me." That way, we'll know we're on this journey together. And if you want to continue walking with us, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave your like. There are many sacred things we have yet to reveal,